And it's good to be back at Tel Aviv University. It's also a great honor to have with us Professor Ian Porat, the president of the university. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is also a good opportunity to thank Tal and the association for organizing the annual conference here at Tau. My name is Sharon Pardo. I'm from Ben Gurion University of the Negev. No one is perfect, I know. But this panel is actually dedicated to two books that were recently published on EU-Israeli relations, or a book that is, well, covering the Israeli case study. Two books. The first one is actually Here It Is Europe, Israel and the European Union. A book, just a second. We also have our PowerPoint presentation. Tal, can we actually share it? Or
we will share it.
You want to share it with the
Zoomers.
Yeah, with the Zoomers. So the first book is actually Here It Is Europe, Israel and the European Union, a book co-authored by Ambassador Ronnie Leshno-Yar of Ben Gurion University of the Negev, Dr. Hila Zehavi of Ben Gurion University of the Negev, next slide, and myself. And the second book is a book which was authored by Dr. Yuval Reinfeld of Ben Gurion University of the Negev, as well as Reichman University. The title of the book is The European Union as a Normative Power, the Role of the CGAU. What we will do now, we will change a bit our panel, as unfortunately both Sarka and Nisser from the Open University and Hila Zehavi were not able to join us due to personal reasons. But we will open up actually with Ambassador Ronnie Leshno-Yar, former Israeli ambassador to the European Union and the first Israeli ambassador to NATO, as well as a long-time career diplomat with the foreign ministry. Ambassador Leshno-Yar, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Sharon. I want to thank President Ariel Porat for honoring us with his presence here. As a diplomat, I have to start with some acknowledgement. So thank you, Sharon, for inviting me to participate in the work of this book. You and Dr. Hila Zehavi are fantastic partners of mine, and the work with you is a real pleasure. I also acknowledge in the room the presence of several former colleagues of mine from the foreign ministry, all of them former ambassadors, experts on Europe, as much as I am an expert on EU-Israel. So I thank you for coming to this panel. And what I would like to say is also addressed to you, my former colleagues in the foreign ministry, as well as to my new colleagues, new friends from the academia. I am a graduate of this university 45 years ago. The head of my department was Professor Shimon Shamir. My teachers were Professor Itamar Rabinovich, Sasson Somech, Asher Sasser, and many other fantastic scholars that I established also personal relationship with them when I was in the diplomatic service as a junior diplomat and also as an ambassador. Also with Professor Shlomo Ben Ami, also from this university, he was the head of the Israeli delegation to the multilateral negotiations on Palestinian refugees, and I was his right-hand man in that delegation. I was the coordinator of the delegation, and later, when he was foreign minister, I advised him to appoint a university professor to lead an academic team that will give him a different perspective than the perspective that he gets from the diplomats. And we asked Professor Sasser to be the head of this diplomatic academic team, and he agreed. But then Second Intifada broke, and this idea was dropped unfortunately. So I'm saying all that because I think that what Israel's diplomacy lacks is an academic perspective, and at the same time, the academia lacks a diplomatic perspective. So this is almost my bottom line, that we need to do more to bring together the bureaucracy, the diplomats, and the academia, because the two perspectives are complementary, and diplomats must talk to university professors, and they don't do that in a way that I would like them to do. When I was a young diplomat, Rabinovich was my ambassador in Washington. Shimon Shamir was ambassador in Cairo and Amman. Shlomo Ben Ami was ambassador in Spain. Not anymore, not anymore. So I would like to see more university professors as ambassador. There is no reason why Sharon Pardo or Yuval cannot be the ambassadors of Israel to the EU in Brussels. At the same time, it will happen one day.
There's also Gabi Shalev,
Well, there were many.
another professor.
Of course, there were many others, many others, but not anymore. We stopped dialoguing, the government and the academia, and it's a shame. I think that we have to do much more to improve that situation. And you need more diplomats in the universities. I teach at Ben Gurion. I enjoy it. I hope that they enjoy it as well.
Absolutely.
I think that you need to see more diplomats teaching in this university and other universities to bring their particular perspective, which is different than the normal university perspective. And I think that in the previous panel, we saw the beginning of this discussion between diplomacy and academia. Now, the name of the chapter that I wrote for this book, what's good for Israel, good for Europe, or what's good for Europe, good for Israel, is the name of a law, a relatively new law that was adopted by the Knesset in 2023. And it has to do with Israel adopting European regulation to save us money, to save us headache, to save us time. And our government is very proud of that piece of legislation, and rightly so. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Economic Affairs, the Minister of Finance publicly spoke highly about this new law, but at the same time, they speak badly about Europe as a political entity. And that's, in essence, is the tension between the love and hate relations between Israel and the EU, Israel and Europe. And I think that I tried in the chapter to put a projector on this tension between the two aspects of Israel treatment of the EU. On the one hand, we love the EU because of trade, because of agricultural export, because of funding projects, Horizon, research project, etc., because of sports and the Eurovision. At the same time, we hate Europe because of politics, because of the way that they view the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Iran, normative issues, human rights issues in Israel, etc. And the dilemma here, how the government can balance this love-hate relations. One good example is the incident that we have with Creative Europe, which is an important European project with a lot of money that Israel was just about to join that program. But 3 days before it came to the technical, in fact, automatic adoption of the government, there was a headline in Haaretz, daily Haaretz, that ridiculed the government for adopting a European program, which includes a territorial clause. One then not very known Israeli reporter, Barak Ravid, who was very industrious and every Thursday read the schedule of the government, found out that on the next Sunday, following Sunday, this program is coming for an approval of the government, and he found out that there is a territorial clause in the government, and the headline was, Israel is about to approve a European program that does not see the territories as part of Israel. And the next thing that happened is that the government dropped it out of the schedule, and it has never been adopted since. Although it's a good program for Israel, for our cultural world, and many other good Israelis that lost some livelihood because of the decision not to adopt this program. At the same time, the more important European programs, of course, the trade agreements, Horizon, etc., they include territorial clause, and that will not stop the government from almost automatically adopting them. And when you challenge them about this, I mean, abnormal situation, they don't have anything good to tell you. I challenged directly in a conference, in an ambassadors conference in Israel, the Director General of the Ministry of Education about their failures to adopt the Creative Europe program. And he was on the stage and he had nothing to say about my complaint. Why we missed that opportunity to adopt a fantastic European program.
And you have to mention the Prime Minister was Yair Lapid at the time.
You know, but the culture minister was Miri Regev.
The minister was made.
No, but the Foreign Minister was Yair Lapid. It was
No, of course not. It was Netanyahu. And since then,
was under the former government.
no, it was under Netanyahu.
Netanyahu?
It was under Netanyahu. And since Israel failed to adopt new European programs that include a territorial clause, some of them are very important for Israel's security. And it's the demand of the security services that Israel will join such programs. And the government don't have the courage to do that because of political reasons, although I don't think that anyone in the Israeli public knows the meaning of the territorial clause. Another example is the way that we treat the foreign ministers of Europe. Since 2015, the HRVP, the foreign minister of the European Union, the Commissioner for Foreign Affairs, High Representative, never came to Israel for a working visit. Mogherini came once for the funeral of Shimon Peres. I was with her on the plane. And Borrell came once after October 7th to show kind of solidarity with Israel. But that's it. And I witnessed it personally, they begged the Israeli government to allow them to come to Israel again and again and again. Netanyahu, who is a gentleman, at least 3 times told Mogherini, yes, by all means, come to Israel. And when she came to me to fix date, etc., the answer from Jerusalem was, she's not coming to Israel. So there was never a real dialogue between Israel and that's the dialogue between Israel and the foreign minister of Europe about issues which are important for Israel and for Europe. Now there is a new foreign minister in Brussels, Kallas, which will bring, a new approach to the Commission, and I think that to Israel-EU relations. I don't think that the Greek government will be interested to have a real dialogue with her, but at least we will be more polite to Kaja Kallas and have a much more normal dialogue with her. I don't know how much time I have because I have many more things to say, but
You have 9 minutes.
okay. So one of the things that I'm trying to emphasize in the chapter and also in my discussions with students and with colleagues is the difference between multilateral diplomacy and bilateral diplomacy. Traditionally, Israeli diplomacy, like all other diplomatic circles in the world, are focused on bilateral diplomacy. Multilateral diplomacy is totally different. It's a different branch of diplomacy. It's almost a different profession, different lingo, different manners, different ethics, and different things to watch. And I think also, Tal, that in the previous panel, we briefly touched upon this. And in the European Union, it's fascinating the way that they manage the bureaucracy in Brussels. And you have to be really on the ground to understand really what makes them tick, what is important, what is not important, what is the schedule of the institutions, the affiliation, the loyalty, and etc. And as I said in the previous panel, whereas in normal multilateral institutions, the UN, for example, you have the loyalty to the institution, to the UN, you have the loyalty to your government, and you have the loyalty to your own personal ambitions, family, spouse, salary, etc. in Brussels, at the EU, there is another layer of loyalty, which you don't find really at the UN, and that's the, I say, party loyalty, ideological loyalty, because each and every European bureaucrat is attached to a certain specific political party in his own country. Borrell is a Spanish socialist, and what makes him tick is not only, maybe not at all, European ideology or even personal ambition, or even a national loyalty, but it is party ideology. He is a classic Spanish socialist, and you could see it throughout his 5 years in Brussels, and you will see it with Kaja Kallas that her first, second, and third priorities will be Russia, Ukraine, Russia ambitions, etc. And you have to understand this in order to be a good diplomat in Brussels, and maybe also a good scholar in the university. Otherwise, you'll ask people questions when you come to interview them for a paper, and they will give you the normal answers that you expect them to give you. But this is not the right answers that you want to hear from them. You want to hear the truth, not the party line. And normally you will hear from them the party line, but only if you are on the ground, you'll hear the truth from those people. So this is why I'm saying academic research will complement the knowledge that diplomats accumulate when they are on the ground. And you bring the two together, you have a better picture of what's going on in Brussels and maybe also in capitals in the different member states of the EU. I'll stop here.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Leshner. I must say myself as well, it was a great pleasure working with you on this book. And I'm very, very happy and proud that this is actually a combination of work, which is a joint effort of diplomats and academics. And what you're preaching, this is exactly what you did. So thank you very much for that.
Could I ask you a brief question?
Yes, please.
Okay,
please.
very briefly.
Please.
So, Ronnie, I understand completely the advantage of having diplomats at the university contributing from their experience and so on and so forth. But of course, the same argument applies also to other people coming from the practice and joining the university. I'm a little bit less, well, I'm not familiar enough as you are with the real contribution of academicians going into diplomacy. Now, of course, it could be, people like Itamar Binov, which is a very talented person, and maybe if his religion were not at the university, might be a good choice, and the same thing about others. So my question is whether you could really point out, what is the specific advantage that a professor from a university would bring to diplomacy? Because after all, diplomacy seems to be a very practical issue, and even though I am biased in a way to agree with you and to say, yes, of course, professors could contribute, and I do believe that they contribute also in other fields, I'm still a little bit more puzzled by the specific contribution of professors as such to diplomacy.
Yeah.
Can I join this comment?
I would also like to,
Answering?
from my perspective.
The idea was that we hold the dialogue, the dialogue later on. The thing is
Directly to
that,
this point, it's really relevant.
just a second, I'll just mention it because there are other questions here as well.
It's
The
not
thing
a
is that
question, it's an answer.
Professor Porat is about to leave us soon.
Yeah,
so
I
that's the reason
apologize.
why we
Okay.
open it up for.
Yeah, maybe
questions
Ronnie
and
should have
answers.
mentioned that Ronnie started his diplomatic career with me.
Right.
This is true. That's
Okay,
true.
I-
We
with all-
were in
50
the
years ago.
IDF. Both of us were sent to Singapore in a way, to build the 8200 for Singapore in a way, right?
Don't say
It's not a secret anymore. After 45 years.
Okay, Rachel really wants to comment.
Yeah.
Gerald, you will comment later on, please.
From the
Yeah.
academic, I have my own experience with the foreign ministry exactly on that, so go ahead.
Exactly. If I, with all modesty, I can give a personal example. I joined the Ministry of Justice as סגנית למשנה ליועץ המשפטי לממשלה בינלאומי, and I was participating with other ministries at negotiations with the EU, with the WTO, And with all modesty, I think that as an academic, I brought so much knowledge from my EU doctorate and my research in Europe that I for sure contributed knowledge which was lacking, and some perspective because I lived for so many years in Holland. So I understood also better the ideas, the way, the culture, the way of negotiating with them, and etc. And also as an academician, how do you say it? I was in charge of arranging conferences for עובדי מדינה, how do you say it? Civil servants, and I always brought people from the academia and civil servants. Therefore, I would like to broaden your, which I agree, of course, with your contention, to broaden it from diplomats and universities to civil servants, diplomats and universities, because my work and other people maybe work at the ministry was valuable.
Thank you, Rachel.
Wait,
Gerald,
wait,
please,
let me-
Gerald, we'll open it up. Very
Gerald,
soon, you
no.
you will get your 5 minutes, I promise you.
30 seconds.
I think that Itamar was a brilliant ambassador in Washington. Brilliant, because of what Itamar is. His university expertise, but it's also his personal thing that he brought to the job, his English, his familiarity with many people in Washington, DC, and in American university. I was proud to serve under him as my ambassador. So it's not only just bringing professors to become ambassadors. First, they need to want to be. If I offer it to Sharon, I don't know if he's interested, or to Yuval. And then they need the qualifications, not only the academic qualifications, but the personal, family.
Not only ambassadors.
Rachel, please.
No, we don't need them as junior diplomats.
There is an
No,
American
go to the
model,
course.
the American model
Rachel, please.
has been
Gerald
tried
also
here
wants-
and blocked by the Histadrut.
Gerald,
Also, I can see university professors as candidates to lead the research division of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, for example, okay? Not only abroad, but also in the foreign ministry.
Gerald, please.
The American model, which I grew up in at the university, a lot of my colleagues went into the State Department for 2 years, this is not in ambassadors, but in all sorts of different bureaus, and you know some of them. We tried that in Israel. And it was the Barak government. It was Shimon Stein at the head of it at that time. It was Bakarat Neshek Strategi. That was my expertise. And I was part of a group that met informally. And we have worked out a plan that Shimon would spend 2 years in academia and I would spend 2 years as an expert. I knew the material better than most of it because there's no 3-year rotation for academics in different fields. And the Va'ad Ovdim said, אי אפשר כי זה דרך להכניס כל מיני לא דיפלומטים לתוך המסגרת שלנו.
Okay, the book is not about that. The book is about Israel-EU relations.
אני אומרת,
Side issue.
דיפלומטים, אני הייתי עובדת מדינה.
Guys, thank you very much. Rachel, something that you need to say now, or
Yes,
you can
and I think
postpone
Tal
it for
say
the
it better,
conversation.
Tal should say it better, that our association is trying all the time to bring together civil servants and academia together.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, since Professor Porat is here with us for a limited time, any question which is to be directed to Ronnie that you want to raise, comment, something? Or we move on and we'll have time. We will have time for.
Very brief comment.
Yes, please.
To strengthen the points of Rachel, I think that Shlomo Ben-Ami contributed to very large improvement in relations between Spain and Israel when he was ambassador there. He is still remembered as the best ambassador that was in Spain by the Spaniards.
Well, Alfred, if it helps, I really don't want to be an ambassador. That helps.
But I want him to be ambassador.
Okay, guys, so thank you very much, Ronnie, and we will continue with the book. As I said, the book was just recently published. It's part of a book series which we call The Europeans, which is dedicated to the founding fathers and the mothers of the European integration project. Actually, the 6th book is coming soon, which Alcide de Gasperi is the next one that we will cover. But let me move on.
We will have to make a short break now, and I'll pause the
Recording and now share.
and let's share.
Welcome to the Startup Nation. Okay, guys, order. I guess it's time to reconvene again. The book is actually divided into several chapters, and one of the chapters that we are to present here today is the chapter which is dedicated to Israel, Netanyahu's Israel relations with the far right. Gerald, I am afraid you're not going to like this presentation. Now, in February 2019, during Viktor Orban's visit to Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu highlighted a strong bond between Israel and Hungary, with a clear message from Jerusalem to Brussels and the international community. Now, according to Netanyahu, Israel and Hungary are both small nations, democracies that share common values and common interests. Bear in mind, common values. Now, the alliance between Netanyahu's Israel and Orban's Hungary exemplifies Israel's transformation under Netanyahu into an illiberal, right-wing, populist power that increasingly aligns with Europe's radical right parties and governments. Now, this shift led Netanyahu's Israel to embrace what we know as soft Euroscepticism. Now, soft Euroscepticism involves contingent or qualified opposition to European integration. And this is exactly what we are arguing. When Netanyahu first came to power in 1996, Jews faced no widespread persecution in Europe, and Israel actually enjoyed a quiet, good period of diplomatic relations with most of the European countries. Nevertheless, Netanyahu and his party sought to cultivate relations with radical right populist parties and governments, the direct heirs of neo-Nazis and anti-Semites in Europe. These new allies quickly reciprocated through mutual diplomatic overtures. Now, a notable example is Netanyahu's relations and the Likud party relations with the Vlaams Belang party. Despite its founders' Nazi collaboration and its past leadership's Holocaust skepticism, the party now is an ardently supporter of the State of Israel. Philip de Winter, the former leader of Vlaams Belang, claims that the party is very often the only one defending Israel, though critics accuse it of betraying nationalism in return for Jewish money and kowtowing for international Zionism. Since the early 2000s, the party has only rarely been accused of anti-Semitism and positions itself as the defender of Jewish interests in Belgium. De Winter himself argues that there's a common interest between Jewish and Flemish people in the struggle against Islam in Europe. He actually urges Jews to join the fight, and I'm quoting, "Jews are our brother in arms in the battle against extremist Islam. They are part of European culture. Islam is not." Now, positioning itself as Israel's ally against radical Islam, the party joined other European populist parties on a December 2010 delegation to Israel, in which they declared what we know as the Jerusalem Declaration, pledging their support for the existence of the State of Israel and its right to defend itself against any aggression, especially against Islamic terror. Following the October 7th massacre and the war, members of the Vlaams Belang party have shown clear support for Israel. The most well-known one is of the member of the Belgian parliament, Sam van Rooij, who basically declared the following, asking at the Belgian parliament why so many Palestinians choose Belgium and how they get to our country from Gaza. And then he went on to cite a report, a scientific report, that according to this report, for Hamas, well, the support for Hamas among Palestinians is about 70% of Palestinians, and according to him, Belgium is Hamas. Now, the relationship with Germany's AfD is even more striking, as this party is obviously a party with open anti-Semitism and neo-Nazi ties. Despite this, Israeli figures have occasionally advocated for closer ties with the party. It was Minister Rafi Eitan, who was a minister of the Netanyahu government, who actually called for the party to become alternative for Europe rather than alternative for Deutschland. In August 2019, when the newspaper was closely tied with the Likud party, the newspaper actually started a campaign advocating for close relations between Israel and the AfD. The biggest threat today to Israel and European Jewry does not come from the right, but rather from the left and its partner voters in the Arab and Muslim immigrant communities. Benjamin Netanyahu's son, Yair Netanyahu, actually became the poster boy for the party. In May 2020, in a famous tweet of the son of the prime minister, he tweeted that shame on you, he called for Europe, shame on you for financing a disgrace in the holiest day of the Israeli calendar. We have one day a year to remember our fallen soldiers, and you destroy it with a memorial to Palestinian terrorists. EU is an enemy of Israel and an enemy of all European Christian countries. Schengen zone is dead, and soon your evil globalist organization will be too, and Europe will return to be free, democratic, and Christian. Following this tweet became actually a poster of the AfD party by its former member of European Parliament, Joachim Kuss. Here you go. This is the famous poster that was produced by the AfD. In mid-October 2023, following the October 7 massacre, Alexander Guland, one of the founders, leaders of the AfD, declared in the Bundestag that Hamas celebration on German streets is unbearable. The party demanded that German citizenship be revoked from Hamas supporters. Now, unlike the AfD party, the relationships between Netanyahu's Israel and the Lega party of Matteo Salvini is out there in the open. And Matteo Salvini, Lega's leader, regards Israel as a fortress for the protection of Europe and a bulwark of Western rights and values. Now, while criticizing EU's unbalanced stance on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and its condemnation of Israel every 15 minutes. Now, this mutual admiration is, by the way, evident in Salvini's self-description as a friend of and a brother of Israel, and Netanyahu himself is calling him a great friend of Israel. Later on, Minister Gilad Erdan, later on the ambassador, emphasized the shared agenda between the Likud party, Israel, and Salvini. We are partners in the fight against radical Islamic terror, which threatens Europe and Israel. Salvini only recently declared that the Hamas attacks in Israel were not a war, it's barbarism. A month later, Salvini told Italian media that Hamas uses civilians as human shields, adding that it proves the bestiality of these people. Now, Netanyahu also cultivated a unique relationship with Geert Wilders and his PVV party in the Netherlands, which is well known for its anti-Islamic stance. Unlike other European far-right parties, the relationship with Geert Wilders and his party are a lot easier for Netanyahu's Israel, mainly because of the fact that there is no neo-Nazi past. Now, Israel does not view the PVV as an anti-Semitic or as a party that having fascist roots. The fact that Geert Wilders himself is married to a Jewish lady even helps in this relationship. Wilders actually spent 18 months in Israel, volunteering in Moshav Tomer, in the occupied territories. By the way, this is the only ever picture taking of him with black hair rather than this famous color of his. According to Wilders, Israel is a lighthouse and the only democracy in a dark and tyrannical region. It's part of us, of our European identity. Israel is fighting our war. The struggle against Israel is a struggle against us. We are Israel. And then he moves on, and you can see the other famous declaration. Only recently, following the attacks in Amsterdam, Wilders declared that all attackers are Muslims, Moroccans. We, the Netherlands, have become the Gaza of Europe. Now, as I don't have time to go through the famous relationship with the V4 country, I won't go there, but I want to say that actually Netanyahu admitted that this is his own policy. In 2018, Netanyahu traveled for the first time to Lithuania, and shamelessly, he declared at the airport the following: I want to achieve a balance in the European Union's not always friendly relations with Israel in order to maintain fairer relations. I am doing it through contacts with blocs of EU countries, Eastern European countries, and now with Baltic countries and other countries, of course. Now, all this to tell us, and again, I'm not going to dive into other relationships with the V4 country, but I want to put, as we have members of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here, I want to put the famous guidelines on communication with populist radical right parties, which are, unfortunately, I never saw them, I only heard of them, they are top secret, but as far as I know, I understand from the Israeli media, these are the guidelines. Israeli government ministries and agencies were prohibited from communicating with anti-Semitic and neo-Nazi populist radical right parties whose leaders and or members called for the destruction of Israel and European Jewish communities. The Israeli government would not initiate dialogue with radical right party if the local Jewish community opposed to such engagement, and the Israeli government would consider the positions of like-minded countries. Now, these are guidelines that were written by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. However, the Netanyahu government decided that they are of no relevance, and only recently we heard that Romania accuses Israel of election interference after Amichai Shikli for actually strong relations with the Romanian anti-European and pro-Russian candidate. You can see other examples of the meeting between Ambassador Reuven Ezer and George Simeon of the Or Party and others. Now, all this takes me to the conclusion that the alliance between Netanyahu's Israel and the European populist radical right forces transcends mere realist interests. And they are encompassing shared values and ideological affinities that often conflict core EU policy norms. At a pragmatic level, these relationships operate on a quid pro quo basis. European radical right populist parties and governments leverage their Israeli connections to counter accusations of anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and anti-human rights stances, while gaining Israeli expertise in security, cyber technology, agriculture, high-tech sectors, and today we also know that they also receive coronavirus shots. The famous Pfizer shots were sent to Hungary and other radical right governments in Europe. This is according to an official report of the Israeli government. Now, in return, Israel utilizes these populist and illiberal allies to legitimize its colonial endeavors and advance its interests in national parliaments, EU institutions, United Nations agencies, and other international fora. Now, beyond these practical exchanges, what I argue lies a deeper ideological convergence. As clearly demonstrated during the recent judicial overhaul, in which ministers in Israel, ministers in Poland, ministers in Hungary declared officially that the three countries are learning from each other, from their experiences in their own judicial overhauls. What we argue is that these partnerships reflect shared values and objectives specifically aiming at challenging the liberal norms that have traditionally underpinned EU policies. Now, in 2018, Netanyahu declared, together with Viktor Orban, that we both understand the threat of radical Islam is a real one. It could endanger Europe by being here at the front line of the battle against radical Islam. In many ways, Israel is defending Europe. So our argument is that the relationship of Netanyahu's Israel with European radical right populist forces extends beyond a mere instrumentalization to counter external pressures and divide EU member states and UN agencies. It reflects deep ideological affinities and shared values with what we call Europe's polypores. Thank you. So I promised you that you're not going to like it, Gerald.
Great.
Thank you. Well, we will continue
Cherry
next, but I hate
picking,
it.
overstated, ideological, perfect.
So we will move on, and I promise you that we will have time to comment on this presentation. But we now move on to another book, and this is yet another book that was published on Israel, written in Israel about the European Union, proudly written by Dr. Yuval Reinfeld, and the floor is yours, please.
Before we do that, I just want to make sure I got the presentation. This is yours, right, Sean?
No.
No, I think it's on the other side of the
This
desk.
is Yuval, to my mind.
Yes, but he also copied to the desktop. Wait a second.
Okay, to see, it's this one here.
Yes, I think so.
Here we go.
Okay.
And I think and can I have the mouse, please?
You will in a minute, but let
No, I
me,
want it
this
now.
is a very slow mouse and not very cooperative.
Work.
This was supposed to be the best room and in the building, but it's giving us a hard time. So
As I said, welcome to the
Startup Nation,
startup.
I
nation.
know, it all
That's
works
always
fine
all over Israel.
until
Same
you,
story.
it works fine until you try it. Okay, so I'm gonna share, is it okay? I'm gonna share the presentation now.
Yeah, no.
And it's slow, but here we go. Okay. That's right. And do you want it full screen now?
Yeah. It's only 41 pages.
Well, I'm sure you know which of them count more.
Yeah, I will do it
Go ahead.
faster.
And
Yes. So one on the-
you can-
Yeah, it will be better.
Perfect.
It's faster.
So thank you very much. And first of all, Tal and the association, thank you for having us. And Sharon and Ronnie, it's always a pleasure to be with. And I hope to keep the flame in my book too, as you did. My book is wishing to reflect another perspective. It neglects a bit the political issues of the occupied territories, and I'm speaking about legal aspect, right? The Psagot winery, the Brita cases, which are fascinating and is a great perspective to measure the relations of the European Union and Israel, and also to maybe measure a bit how the European Union influence abroad. But in my book, I'm trying a bit emphasize on integration of two theoretical prisms, the normative power Europe, which you are all probably aware to, and the regulatory single market, the power of the standards of the single market. I found it very fascinating to research in general, and particularly in today when the European Union creating digital fascinating standards that influencing Israel and globally the whole world. So that was the intro to the intro. So today, a short intro about my book, just a glimpse, then the integration of power, the normative and the regulatory. I suggest to call it technical niche normative power, sectoral power normative one that we may found less in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but more in professional ministry, like the Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Environmental Protection. Those case studies are much more cut and clean in my point of view. Then a few words about the power of the single market, both in the traditional prism and the digital prism, the new one. By the way, my next book with Dr. Aviv Gaon is going to be only digital influence, so maybe to find it more clear, the headline of the book more clear. But there is a lot of these digital aspects in the book. Then a few words about the role of the Court of Justice of the European Union. I take here the case study of personal data of privacy. I must say in the bottom line nowadays to say that privacy and data protection is a clear-cut case, it's an easy one. But like 6-7 years ago, it was less clear. When I started the interviews with the מחלקה הבינלאומית, International Affair of Ministry of Justice, שכחתי איך אומרים את sorry, and it was less clear than today. And if I'll have time, I'll show some of the diffusions of norms through the regulatory aspects to Israel. Again, it's really easy now when we have amendment number 13 to the privacy law of Israel. It's a much clearer case of how norms diffusing into the Israeli market through regulation of the European Union, but it's not the only case. I'll show you also in the artificial intelligence aspect and so on. So the intro now, the real intro. So the book, in just, to jump from one place to another, want to measure as any theoretical aspect one wish to measure the influence of the European Union globally. And here in the book, I'm trying to suggest the integration of the Brussels effect, the power of the single market, the unique power that show his first buds in the case of Cassis Dijon and the Single European Act and the white paper of the 80s and then the Maastricht Treaty. We are seeing a standard that creating a fascinating free movement on the one hand, but on the other hand, a human-centric approach, a consumer-centric approach. If you want to be part of this market, you need to preserve the standards of the market. So I integrate these theoretical prisms of Anno Bradford and other researchers with the normative influence power. Then I also touching about the unique power of the Court of Justice of the European Union in integrating, unifying, consolidating the power of the European Union. We do see, according to his rulings, it's not only about the Breda case and Psagot winery, but also in additional cases, how it unified and create a much more pragmatistic, realistic approach of the European Union abroad. And finally, the normative power. Couple of words about, no, you know what, I will show you it later. So the normative power, you're all familiar, the power of the internal norms of the European Union. We have several waves. The first wave that emphasize more Eurocentric ideals, the later waves that focus on the norm receivers. We do see a lot of, we do see a lot of last decade policies that correspond with the norm receiver agenda. The partnership priorities of the new neighborhood partnership project, and in DICI, we have the global strategy from 2016, etc., that understand that the European Union, on one hand, need to speak in one voice. On the other hand, need to preserve and to be more focused on priorities of the others. The EU regulatory power focused more on the uniqueness of the size of the market, on the institutions, the flexibility of the institution, the fact that we are preserving a mechanism that work better than other powers, for example, the United States. The legal basis order that work, that preserve or bringing a unique power to this market, and also the discourse between the civil and political aspects to create working groups. So in practice, what does it mean, the single markets and the standards? So we are all familiar, maybe we have it here, the CE marking, yes, we have it in all the electricity. Those are the technical standards, but they are behind them. They have a normative aspects to preserve a high quality standards for the consumers. So if you are familiar with מה שטוב לאירופה, טוב לישראל, this is working on the same aspect to diffuse standards. Those are traditional ones. The energy efficiency label that we are all familiar in the dishwashers and the refrigerators are also a standard mechanism to reflect to the consumer, to the end user, to the citizen, the resident, the full information, a full transparency on the product. So we can duplicate this also to other aspects. For example, the Psagot winery, labeling the origin of the product. This is the right of the citizen because he is in the center to know better and to get his best choices when he buy a product or when, and here I'm going to the digital era. In 2015, the European Union launched the digital single market. This is working probably the same as the traditional single market, but here the European Union innovative point of view understood that there is no, we are not in the business of physical borders anymore. Data is everywhere and we need to duplicate aspects abroad. So this is a great integration or example case study to show you the normative and the regulatory calendar. For example, we have Article 3 of the GDPR, the exterritorial mechanism that obliged entities and companies that established, for example, in Israel, in the United States, in Brazil, to take measures when they are processing personal data of European citizens. The Digital Services Act, same, safe platforms, transparently, as we see after October 7th, when the Commission investigate X and Meta and TikTok because of fake news and misleading information and hate speech. The human-centric approach of the artificial intelligence, a new regulation that entered into force only in last August, and we are going to see it in several steps. They are all very, dry regulatory laws, but they have inside them international influence of the European Union, and we also see very clear, some of them are only first buds, but we see also clear evidence of those influence in Israel too. I spoke about it before. I suppose this is the new policies that we see, the European global strategy and so on. The technical normative approach, and I spoke about it, and here are some of the evidence. For example, this is from the AI bill. Now we have an AI Act, it's officially a law, but this is from the AI proposal, the bill. We have also the importance of the single market power, and also the importance of preserving Article 2 of the Treaty of Lisbon, preserving the values of the European Union. I have time.
You do.
No, I do it fast, I'm sorry.
No worries.
All right, so now the role of the CGU. So there is a lot of researchers, maybe they are not less better than me, sorry. But here I want to just show you for an example, the role of the CGU in aspects of data protection of privacy. And few words before, because there are hundreds of fascinating CGU cases, equal to Israel, that we have few cases relating to privacy according to nowadays. But the issue about that is that those cases or part of them came to the world way before the GDPR. It was the European Court of Justice that took the fundamental charter, the fundamental rights charter, the right for personal data. Can we imagine that we have a human right in the fundamental right charter that enshrined the right of every European Union citizen of safeguarding or preserving, or the right to know what other do with his personal data? So here, for example, the Court of Justice analyze this right and take it even to other areas. Mario Costilla is a Spanish guy that was under bankruptcy, and I assume that decade or 12 years after that, he found in Google that he is still in the first searches under bankruptcy. And he applied to the Court of Spain and then a preliminary ruling to the European Court of Justice. And he said that he has the right that this info, he doesn't say the right to be forgotten, but he said, I have the right that people will not think that I'm under bankruptcy, hurting me. And Google said, listen, this is free of speech and we cannot control these platforms, etc., etc. And this is the first time in 2014 that the court declared about the right to be forgotten. This is a genuine critical right that all the tech companies implemented in their mechanism. You can just Google, in Google, the right to be forgotten, and you will have an Hebrew web form that you can fill your details and the right to be forgotten. Of course, Max Schrems is the leader of the fascinating political GDPR aspects. If you're not familiar with this case, Max Schrems was a PhD doctorate in the United States when the revelation of, no, I'm wrong?
No, it's good.
Sorry, this, all right. All right, so Max Schrems, it was the first time that we are all tackled with the Edward Snowden reveals about US authorities' actions. He then understood that the subpoenas and the competences that the United States authorities have in their hands due to the Patriot Acts and other surveillance acts are too broad. And he flew to Ireland, where back then Ireland considered to be the notorious member states because all the taxes going to their government and all the tech companies are there. So they're trying to block Max Schrems' claims. And basically he said, listen, the agreement between the EU Commission and United States on data sharing is not aligned with the fundamental rights we have. The fact that data is transferring from the European Economic Area, from databases of Facebook in Ireland to databases of Facebook in California, violating our rights for personal data. He applied to the European Court of Justice in 2015, again, way before the GDPR, and the Court of Justice of the the Court of Justice declared that this agreement, the Safe Harbor Agreement, is invalid, again, consolidating the actions of the institutions of the European Union. Before that, after that, 5 years, 2020, the second data sharing agreement, the Privacy Shield, also declared invalid, also because of Max Schrems. And now we have the third privacy data sharing between US and the European Union. It's still valid. It's under question in court still because of Schrems. We call it Schrems number 3 or Schrems number 4 because we have another issue between that Schrems brought to court. But this is another interesting case to show you the influence of the European Court of Justice. We have multiple interesting European Court of Justice question, for example, how you retain data in the processing proposed, PNR cases when we are, the passenger name record, aspects about terror and criminal aspects. Can we process as a public authorities or as a police how much data, how we want data? Court said no, it depends on the issue. If it's terror, yes, but if it's only criminal, it's only murder, no. And of course, we have the meta cases of July 2023, where the European Court of Justice almost collapsed all the model of Meta, of how they process data for advertisement, because they are not reflecting transparently to the end user the way they act. So this is if you can see the line, it's working the same traditionally and innovatively. GDPR is influencing in different phases. For example, we have in Article 45 the level of adequacy. Now we are all familiar with the level of adequacy because Israel granted a new level of adequacy in January 2024. It's a very important tool that Israeli always wish to achieve. And basically, if you read Article 44.2, the European Union give you an okay that you are a good country if you implement in your laws, in your internal laws, same aspects, same values, rule of law, respect of human rights in your internal law, you will receive ease in how you transfer data from Israel, how companies transfer data. There is a lot of entities that wish to achieve this level of adequacy. According to today, we don't have more than 12 or 13. This is the global effect of the GDPR as of today. More than 19 US states. We have Brazil with the LGBT. We have the AAPPA. We have et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, we have Israel now. So I want just to wrap our conversation. How much I have, Sharon?
3 minutes.
Oh, amazing. So I want to wrap with the case studies of diffusion of norms into the Israeli systems. I have in my book, I took 3 cases. I took the environmental protection, which is, I think, traditionally, but we have a lot of evidence of normative regulatory diffusion because the environmental protection were very much involved in TIEX and twinning projects, and they want to absorb as much as they can from the European knowledge. I have there the animal welfare and agricultural aspects and the case study of the digital sphere with the data protection case. So back then, there were many first interesting aspects. For example, interviews with the Ministry of Justice that said that how they wish to be the longing of being more like the European Union, adopt human right approach as the GDPR and not aspects that are more property aspects as we see in United States. We have evidence from the Israeli protocols, Knesset protocols. For example, Vadat Chukah Chok Mishpat from 2017, led by Revital Swed. We have evidence from the Ministry of Justice reports, and then we have the new evidence, which are very clear and cut. We have the level of adequacy. We have Tikkun 13, amendment number 13 to the new privacy law. Basically, it's an almost duplication of the GDPR. It's almost duplication, not one-to-one, but a lot of aspects are copy-paste from the idea of putting the human in the center of any action we are doing when we are processing personal data. We are here in Israel call it privacy, but in the European Union, they call it personal data. They open the discussion to not only a data that it's under privacy. It can be any personal data. There are also regulation in Israel that specifically relate to data that transferred from the European Economic Area and other diffusions. You can read the proposal, you can read the explanation. There is a lot of European Union inside them. The standards are controlling the mechanism. And also we have evidence now, interesting one in the AI prism. I encourage you to be interested in the AI aspects, also in political prism, of course. So we have now a lot of Israeli documents that involve also the AI Act and the ID behind the European Union aspect. And the last one is the financial report that published 3-4 days ago, dealing with implementing artificial intelligence in the financial sector. That's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Yuval. I guess you're all wondering, where did he write his PhD? Well, he wrote his PhD at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev.
And he was my supervisor, of course.
But what I'd like to
nepotism.
But what I'd like to do now is to open up for questions, comments, and answers. I think it was Rachel who was earlier eager to raise a question, or you're fine, and Gerald. And I see now Alfred and Sami and Tal, of course. Rachel,
Thank you. No, I'm
okay.
more relaxed now.
We'll take questions and then
Thank you. No, I had my comment
Okay.
to Ambassador Leshno, but now I would like to ask you a question, if possible. Can you give a broader explanation or review of the structure of your book?
Okay.
Okay, just what is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
purpose and how is it structured, you know?
Yeah. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
and to Yuval, fascinating. And do you, because the title of your book, I think, what I saw was CJEU. But later on, you went really into the details, and there's always an interaction between what a court can do, interpret. I mean, it cannot create, it interprets the legal documents of the EU, the legal instruments, the directives, the regulations, and so forth. And they don't always comply completely. I mean, the Brussels institutions don't always comply completely with those fascinating court cases or rulings. So do you also look now and then to implementation of those rulings?
Thank you, Rachel. Yuval, we are taking questions and comments. Is it Gerald next or?
You have somebody else. I'll go third.
Oh.
Alfred has been sitting here.
You are
quietly.
fourth then. Alfred second, Sami third, Danny as well, sorry, and Tal, and then Gerald.
I'll get the last word.
Very, very maybe superficial remarks, but it seems to me that I have been in the field of European economic integration since the 70s, so I have seen it and all the cycles, etc. We have had in this association and at the Hebrew University many conferences dealing with the Europeanization of norms in Israel, way back in the 2000, special issues, etc. If I relate then to that literature and what was going on there, I personally, but you proved maybe the contrary, I have the impression that Europeanization in Israel is on the way down and that Americanization is on the way up. And the reason has to do with this government, but it has to do with general other features. Let's take the issue of the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords, which is always pushed forward by the government, the present government, makes a point that we should have increasing relations with countries of the region, even if they are not democratic, that's not important, etc. And that the European Union is, as you said, hostile to us, and all the dreams we had to coming closer to Europe are a non-starter, etc. I give you a punctual example. 20 years ago, there used to be daily flights, 2 daily flights to Brussels. Okay, Brussels was important. Today, there is nothing. I mean, Brussels as important point for the state of Israel has disappeared. I mean, it looks like having disappeared. On the contrary, Washington. I don't need to tell you. High tech is all geared to the United States, and it has become very important for the state of Israel for all reasons. Trade dependence on the European Union has diminished, like all over the world, for third countries because there is China and India.
Alfred, and the question mark?
Yeah, it's therefore, the question mark is that you gave us the impression that Europeanization is in, which might be true under the table, which is very revealing. I am very happy to hear you. But my hunch is that the new generations in Israel are farther away, even the elites. And I'm not speaking about the Bibi. Okay?
Thank you, Alfred. Sami, Tal, and Danny, please. And then Gerald, of course.
Maybe my question or comment complements what Professor Tovis just said. It's more towards, I mean, it was brilliant what Ronnie and you said, Sharon, and of course, Yuval. It's all very, very interesting, but my comment is mostly towards your book. That's why I was mentioning you first. And I would be interested to read it in full. I didn't have a chance yet, but so maybe it's in the book. I apologize in advance. But the way you presented it, I feel it's like a little bit like putting a finger in a tea cup and measuring the temperature. Because a lot of your slides about actual events, just recent events. And my look is especially, I think, when you look in the long run. That's why I mentioned, for example, the fact that, and I insist on that the voting down of the Creative Europe in the government was under Bennett's prime ministership, with Yair Lapid as foreign minister, and Ayelet Shaked was the government also. I think she was very vocal on the issue. So, no, I don't blame you, but I remember that she was vocal on the issue and very active in the government meeting. So why do I insist on that? Is because, I remember your polls. I don't know if you did any polls recently, but if you look at the trend, we're looking at about the 20 years trend probably, and it touches also on what Alfred is saying, that we see a decline, a serious decline on the popularity overall of the EU in Israeli population. It's not only Netanyahu and his voters, I think throughout the population, also many central people who are voting for Lapid, for example, I'm sure that they also have a more negative attitude. I remember, I touched it on my book, which was Dreaming Beyond the Wall, that I remember episode even under
which is, by the way, the only Israeli novel about the EU.
Yeah. Okay, so I publicized my book.
I did so. I did so.
But what I was mentioning it also because I remember one striking episode, which is more or less we told in the book, even though it's a novel. When I was in Paris as a number 2 in the embassy, I was asked by the ambassador to go to Sciences Po to give a lecture about the situation in the Middle East. Sounds like a very innocent. I'm talking about 2008 or 2009, beginning of 2009. It was Olmert as prime minister. I remember Tzipi Livni was foreign minister. So it's kind of an innocent thing. You go to Sciences Po, you think many nice children. The end of the story was that I had to be taken off the stage by the French police and the security because people were crying child killer and throwing things at me on the stage. And really, I was taken through the backstage back to the car, to the security car, and driven very quickly out of the university. So just to tell you that we are talking also about a long-term trend. We're talking about now 15, 16 years ago, not only under Netanyahu, under the very different governments, where you have, I would say, a mirror effect, decline of EU popularity in Israel, while also Israel, well, I don't have to say that, is becoming much less popular. This is the understatement of the year in Europe.
You became British.
I became British.
Western Europe, that's the difference.
So, I don't know, probably you touch about all these things in the book, but that's my question. How do you deal with these issues?
Okay, thank you very much. Rafi, Danny, Tal, and Jero.
Keep getting moved down. 4, 5.
I have a general comment following what Ronnie said at the very beginning of this conference. I think that the most important secret of diplomacy is the relations we have with Europe, and that we develop and took advantage over the years. So if you follow the relationship of us, and let's remember that we are a small country surrounded by enemies many years. And we thought that Europe can be part of the solution to our problems, and the bureaucracy, the Israeli bureaucracy, worked together and took advantage of the political advantages that we have, ups and downs. So I see our relationship going up and developing, particularly when we approach the political issues in which we agree, and particularly I'm speaking about Oslo and the Oslo period of time. And then the bureaucracy was ready with almost everything that Israel needed in order to push forward. The politicians were stopping some of them, and Dan may remember these issues. And we took advantage of the fact that we were very attractive for Europe, particularly in science and academy. And they always say, well, this is a good reason. If you have so good relations with the US, there is some hidden reason why we have to also to be part of it. So in almost in every field, we put aside politics, the bureaucracy, I'm speaking about my personal experience, we push forward this relationship. And what also Yuval told us about the regulatories and other things. So this is, and we started almost, I think in 1964 to try to be part of the creative program that Ronnie alluded to. So I think this is a good, excellent secret that we kept for many years. That is keeping our nation and country developing and safe in a way. And we have a natural the political issue. We have a domestic issue. We have this issue with Europe, and we took advantage when the political there was some kind of political agreement over the ways we proceed, particularly with Palestinians, to push forward all our agenda. And in other years, we try to keep things alive. And as if you look right and left, all the things that we achieved during these years, they are still there, without some inconvenience and problems from time to time. But we have a free trade agreement. We are part of Horizon, despite all what's going on now in these days. We are continually adopting the regulatory approach into Europe. And still, we will. I think it is part of the wave. So now the wave is going very deep down. Maybe one day will come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafi. Well, Danny, the first Israeli student at the College of Europe.
Not the first one, but
I think you're the first.
anyway, no, I just be very brief. At the end of the day, what I miss, and we've already teaching the pay your book or whatever. What's the end game of Israel policy towards Europe?
What is the
End game.
end game?
And I know that we've been through that. I mean, there was the wider Europe, European economic area. I mean, what are we really looking at Israel at the macro level with Europe? And I think that's the problem. Again, I agree with that the bureaucracy had an idea that it wants as much contact as possible to try to get as much relation, but I think that there was never a real discussion in the Israeli government ever about what is our policy towards Europe. And, sorry?
There was a
Governmental
discussion.
answers.
Anything.
There was a discussion in my time.
So that's, but there's no, but still, I think that this is important to understand because eventually, and by the way, and here again, the issue of the US. I mean, what's going on now with everything like Europe, okay, or what Tov l'Europa, Tov l'Israel. You know who was the first guy to complain about it? The American ambassador. Okay, so he complained. Why do you use that term? Okay, so there is a problem here of trying to balancing the act. And again, when I look towards your book, I mean, anyway, I see the picture being much larger. Europe and the United States now are confronting a much larger challenge. And the real question is not where Israel stands because the Europe, but where Israel stands with this new world economic order, a new political order. Okay, and that's the real challenge. Okay, so that's where we should look at.
To that, Danny. President Sadeh.
Thank you. So Ronnie, I'm very thrilled and excited that you are attending this meeting and that you have joined our association. It was a
Doesn't
long.
sound good.
No. There's no but coming. There's no but at all.
It's all lunch, then you.
It has been our mission for decades, in fact, to integrate academic scholarship with practice in government sector, in business, in communication, and the attendance here is a testimony to this. I want to share with you that academic literature, it's in political science, is very well familiar with what we call multi-level governance. The fact that people play politics on different levels and sometimes also on vertical. dimensions. And for example, just to give you a taste, there's at least part of literature that argues that the main obstacle in political union in Europe is the parties in Europe insisting on national gain. It's very difficult to develop trans-European parties, even when they share ideology. But also you have whips and parties, and whips are there because party discipline is not to be taken for granted. So people have other agendas, and it's certainly well appreciated. In terms of methods, when you interview people, you get something subjective. I totally appreciate. There are other methods. I generally don't use interviews too much, but your experience is interviews too. And the thing is, when you interview people, there's always a suspicion that they say what they think you want to hear. It's always the case. So we back this up with other methods too.
Not really.
Okay, maybe you had a way of interrogating for the real truth. But anyway, just to tell you that this is a very rich field, very well appreciated, and certainly insights from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are very, very welcome. And to Sharon, I was wondering if by hafuch al hafuch, as they say in Hebrew, in the end, Bibi is promoting Israeli integration into Europe because, you know, these people are part of Europe. So, and the amazing thing I find in European integration dealing with extreme right or Eurosceptic parties in general is how they are sort of integrated into the game. You know, they're part of the game, maybe the part that you and I don't like, but they're there. I can see the European Union becoming less liberal before it is being undone. I mean, the institutions have their own resilience.
Gerald arguing for years.
They're there.
EPP, look at the current commission, look at the results of the last election, and then look at each country. It's already there. Okay, I'll wait till my turn.
You're coming next. Professor Steinberg.
First of all, this was 3 very good presentations. Also, I have some comments on all of them. 1 sentence on each one, because we're running out of time. Ronnie, my experience in terms of the Israeli Foreign Ministry dealing with Europe is there is a resentment towards outsiders, particularly academics, among some, not everybody. Among some, this is my territory. You don't know what I know. You don't have access, and don't bother me. And I contrast this with what I saw, not just in the United States, but also in Europe. I remember Mogherini had a whole brain trust of mostly think tank people, academic people, particularly the group that she was associated with and still associated with in Italy. So they brought in people, and she was a political appointee. But I see that, I'll give you one other quick case. And as recently, 4 years ago, an Israeli was appointed ambassador to a country where he did not speak the European country, a major European country, didn't speak the language, and didn't have a lot of experience. And at first, the first message I got was keep out of my areas. Involved, it had to do with also NGO funding and the stuff that I do. Within a year, that individual had come and asked for regular meetings and briefings. So there, and I think that was sort of a culture there. Not everybody at all, but it has to be much more both ways. I have about 10 pages of notes for Sharon, but I'll make it simple.
I'm sure you'll send them all to me.
If and when, or if I did review your chapter, based on your presentation alone, and I would read carefully, I would accuse you of cherry picking, of having picked out some of the most egregious examples, many of which are not really Israeli policy statements. Yair Netanyahu is a very problematic child, but he doesn't reflect Israeli government policy, and to use that. The same thing I think can be said about Shikli is not the foreign minister. Shikli works very hard to be different than the resented foreign ministry establishment. So I don't think you made your case because you picked out, at least in these presentations, you picked out those examples. You did talk about, maybe I want to hear from other people as well. That slide you showed towards the end were the 4 principles, which I've experienced in terms of talking the AFD in particular, and many, just last week, I think it came up, a number of those parties. Now, when they're in government, as in the case of Wilders, there's a different, but it's very complicated. And there's consultation with the Jewish communities, there's consultation with, there's a wide consultation. So you said abolished, and I don't see that, and I'd be interested in whether that's the case or not, that those limitations are there. It's a very complicated relationship, and as Tal said, these are when they become part of the power, the power coalitions, they exercise power. A good diplomatic policy is to engage, whether you agree with them or not. We Israelis got very upset when the United States engaged with the PLO back in the early, at the end of the Reagan period. And Schultz started the dialogue with the PLO. But the argument is you engage with people, with parties that have power you don't agree with. One other comment to you, Val, which I learned a lot from your presentation. I will, again, my experience. I had a case that went to the European Court of Justice, which was based on European norms. It had to do with transparency and funding of NGOs. The European Commission worked very, very hard to prevent any discussion in front of the court about why they refused to grant a freedom of information request dealing with documents that on funding for Israeli and Palestinian NGOs. And eventually there was a lot of back and forth, but eventually they just turned down the case without even a hearing. And not only that, there was huge amount of European, they were very nervous, but they came in very nervous about that. And we were threatened with, if we go and appeal the case, which we thought we had a strong case, and our lawyers thought we had a strong case, but if we appealed the case, we could be given a major fine, which we couldn't afford. So there are some questions there that I just, from my experience, that I'd raised about the politics of the court. I finished.
Gerald, in order to continue this engagement, this copy is yours.
Okay, thank you.
And dedicated, by the
Now I
way.
have to be careful with my
And
review.
dedicated as well. Guys, as the president just announced that we have no time, at least we engaged. So thank you very much. We will continue on the lunch break, coffee break, but we have to go up as we have our.
Yes.